Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
At 15 years old, standing 5 feet 9 inches and still growing, people often mistake me for someone much older. My fluent English doesn't help either. Folks in our small town frequently assume I'm a foreigner or an employee at various stores. Usually, I just explain that I'm a miner running errands for my mom, and most people understand. Most. This happened a few weeks back at the popular supermarket in our local mall. I was wearing basketball shoes, pants, a polo shirt, and a black jacket. Nothing like the store uniform. With my headphones on, I was listening to some Spotify tunes while grabbing items from my mom's shopping list. I was reaching for something on a shelf when I felt a tap on my shoulder. Thinking it was my mom, I turned around and took my headphones off. But it wasn't her. Instead, I found myself face to face with a woman wearing jogging shoes, jogging pants, a sweater, and a backward cap. She asked me where the coffee aisle was. I told her it was about 2 aisles to her right. She disagreed, saying she had already looked there and found no coffee. I offered to call an actual employee to bring some coffee down from storage, but she refused to wait and told me to do it myself. I asked her to repeat herself. She ordered me to bring down the coffee. I tried explaining that I wasn't an employee and was just a 15-year-old kid shopping for my mom. She accused me of making excuses, saying she knew I worked there and complaining about how her money went toward my paycheck. I pointed out that the real employees wore black shoes, black pants, green shirts, white aprons, and green caps. Nothing like what I had on. I repeated that I wasn't an employee, mentioned my age, and said I wanted to finish shopping for my mom. She wouldn't listen and threatened to get my manager if I didn't help her. I put my headphones back on and started walking away. That's when things went from annoying to hostile. She yanked my headphones off my head so hard that the left earpiece was damaged, hanging on by just the wires. I shouted at her, asking what she thought she was doing. She wanted to speak to my manager. I yelled that I wasn't an employee, pointing out I didn't even have a name badge or uniform. She kept asking for my manager so she could get me fired. I lost my patience and loudly repeated that I didn't work there, asking if she was blind, deaf, or both. That's when she slapped me and started pulling me by my jacket sleeve. I broke free and yelled at her until she left. I thought it was over, but 30 minutes later, the same woman showed up again, this time with someone who I thought was the actual manager. She pointed at me, saying I was the employee who had attacked her and demanding I be fired. The manager told her that I wasn't an employee but just a regular customer. She started shouting at the manager, yelling about racism. A crowd formed around us. My mom, who had been looking for me, spotted the commotion and asked what had happened to me. I explained everything. The woman, seeing she wasn't getting anywhere with the manager, walked over to me and grabbed my shirt collar, trying to drag me toward the manager. That was the final straw. I have autism, and when I get pushed too far, I struggle to control my reactions. In anger, I pulled her hand away and started slamming her head against one of the shelves. I even punched her in the stomach before my mom pulled me away. She started screaming, threatening to call the police, her lawyer, and even the local judge. Some people in the crowd tried to defend her, but the manager stood on my side. After 10 to 15 minutes of chaos, the police arrived. They took statements from everyone, me, the manager, the woman, my mom, and several bystanders. They checked the security footage, which showed I was dragged against my will and that she had attacked me first. My mom showed them my ID, proving I was 15 years old. The police arrested the woman. An officer asked if I wanted to press charges, and I agreed. She was charged with child battery, child endangerment, property damage, assault, and resisting arrest. She kicked an officer in the leg during her arrest. Guess some people will never listen to reason. I look young for my age. Usually it's just annoying when people ask to see my ID at bars or think I'm a new student. But there was one day when this youthful appearance almost got me arrested at the high school where I work. I'm a paraprofessional at one of the most dangerous high schools in our state. When the pandemic hit in March, we were all sent home. And for months, I couldn't return to my classroom. Finally, we received designated times to come back and clean out our rooms for the summer. This was important for me since, as a paraprofessional and not a full teacher, my position wasn't guaranteed for the fall. I needed to collect all my personal belongings and the emergency snacks I kept in my desk for my low blood sugar. The school authorized casual wear for this clean-out day, so I showed up in shorts and a t-shirt with my mask on. Most of my co-workers recognized me despite the mask, but there was a problem. The school had hired a new principal and police officer just the week before. Neither of them knew who I was. I finished emptying my desk, packed everything into a bag, and started walking through the halls toward the exit near where I'd parked my car. That's when things went wrong. As I turned a corner, the new officer appeared and immediately shouted at me. He told me to freeze, saying that the school was closed and no students were allowed. He told me to put my bag on the ground and step back with my hands in the air. He said I was trying to sneak in and steal things. I was startled but kept calm. I told him that I was employed with the school. I reached for my ID to show him, but at that moment, the new principal rounded the corner and made everything worse. The principal told the officer that he had spotted a kid stealing and told him to make an arrest, while he told other officers. The officer was now holding my ID, looking between it and me with suspicion. I thought removing my mask might help him see. I was clearly in my 30s with a full beard, so I started to reach up. Bad move. The officer's hand immediately dropped toward his holster as he shouted for me not to move. I froze. Even though officers at our school only carry tasers, batons, and mace, I didn't want to get tased or worse. I spotted a group of teachers down the hall who knew me well. I called out to them for help. The officer told them to stay back, but one of those teachers was our Junior Reserve Officers Training Corps instructor, a retired lieutenant colonel who regularly taught defense classes in the community and had connections with local law enforcement. The lieutenant colonel told the officer to relax. He told him that I had been working at the school for a year and a half and wasn't as young as I looked. The lieutenant colonel walked over unfazed by the officer's commands and signaled for me to remove my mask. When I did, my full beard came into view, and the officer finally matched my face to my ID. The officer's behavior changed instantly. He began apologizing while looking annoyed at the principal, who was now turning red. The officer said sorry and told me that the principal had reported a student stealing equipment, and with my height and build, he had made assumptions. I'm 6 feet 8 inches tall. The tallest officers at our school are only about 6 feet even. You'd think my height alone would be enough to signal I wasn't your average high school student, but not with the mask on. I told him it was okay and that I understood he was just doing his job based on the information he had. The principal stammered that he had made assumptions based on my casual clothes and mask. The lieutenant colonel told the principal that in the future, he should check information before telling officers to arrest staff members. He told him that paraprofessionals are vital to the school's operation. The principal mumbled something about being new and still learning who everyone was before quickly leaving. The officer kept apologizing as he handed back my ID. The officer said how sorry he was, mentioning it was his first week on the job and he had almost tased a teacher. I corrected him, noting I was a paraprofessional, and told him it was fine. I said I wouldn't report the incident and said we were all adjusting to new circumstances. The lieutenant colonel walked me to my car, sharing stories about similar misunderstandings during his military career. As we reached my vehicle, he turned serious for a moment. The lieutenant colonel told me I had handled the situation well. He said that many people would have panicked when an officer reached for his weapon and said that kind of composure is valuable in our school. I appreciated his words, but as I drove home, the adrenaline finally hit me. My hands shook slightly on the steering wheel as I thought about how differently things could have gone if the lieutenant colonel hadn't been there. The next day, I received an email from the principal with an apology and a request to meet him in person when possible. When I went in, he introduced himself properly and asked me about my role at the school. By the end of our conversation, he'd fought to guarantee my position for the following year, a rare certainty in the paraprofessional world. The new officer and I eventually became friendly. I'm just glad my youthful appearance only led to an awkward misunderstanding instead of something much worse. I'm 21 and my dad owns several car washes around our city. While I have my regular job with a security company working nights, usually until midnight and one day until 4 a.m., I help my parents out by checking a few car wash locations on my way home. It's usually a quick 30 or 40-minute detour, but this night kept me occupied for over 1 hour and 30 minutes. My parents have been cautious lately because car washes in our area have been getting broken into. Dad thinks it's because everyone is staying home so they can't rob houses anymore. My responsibilities are straightforward. Drive through the automatic brush bay to make sure no one's hiding behind the equipment, check the vacuum islands, and ensure all the timer screens in the self-serve bays are working properly. That night I was doing my usual rounds when I spotted something odd at the last location. When I drove through the brush bay, I noticed a car backed in next to one of the vacuum islands. The vacuum wasn't running, all doors were shut, and there was no license plate. That raised a small red flag in my mind. I also spotted another car by one of the other islands with its engine running and headlights on. I continued my check of the timer screens, which all looked fine. Then I parked by the office where I could keep an eye on things. The car with its headlights on sat in the self-serve bay for a minute before leaving. I pulled up the security camera feed on my phone to watch the first car, and after a couple of minutes of no activity, I called my dad. Over the phone, my dad told me to go back to the vacuum area and speak with the guy. So I did as told. I backed into the space next to him on the opposite side of the island and kept my car in drive, something my dad taught me to do in case I needed to make a quick getaway. The guy was in the front seat but twisted around, rummaging in the back. I tapped my horn lightly a few times to get his attention, but he ignored me. When he finally turned around, I smiled, waved, and motioned for him to roll down his window. He shouted at me through his closed window, asking what I wanted. I motioned again for him to roll down his window. He responded with a scoff and head shake. During all this, I was giving my dad updates over the phone to keep him from falling back asleep. Eventually, the guy rolled down his window. I greeted him, mentioning that I'd noticed he'd been sitting there for a while, and asked if everything was all right. His tone was immediately hostile, with an attitude that was gradually becoming more openly aggressive. He told me he was fine and demanded to know what I wanted. My dad, who was on speaker but not loud enough for the guy to hear, told me to ask if he planned to use the vacuum. Following Dad's prompt, I asked the man if he was planning to vacuum tonight or if he was just decluttering. The guy responded sarcastically, saying of course he was going to vacuum since he was at a car wash by the vacuums, and added that it wasn't any of my business. I tried to explain my position, but before I could finish, my dad interrupted, telling me to inform the man that he needed to either use the vacuum or leave the property. By this point, the guy had already raised his window and gotten out to move stuff in the back seat. I could now see another person in the passenger seat, probably his partner. She appeared to be saying something, but between her closed window and my dad talking to me, I couldn't hear what she was trying to say. The guy continued making comments about how long I'd been watching him, which made me uncomfortable and anxious. I explained something about not wanting to drive and use my phone at the same time. My dad finally told me to go back to the other side of the building, and from there he told me to call the police to get a no trespass order on both of them. I'm not a fan of police, but I've had to call them before for a similar situation, and I knew my dad would insist on me making the call. After the police arrived, I stayed out of the way and couldn't see exactly what was happening. Eventually, an officer approached to tell me that they had discovered the man had an outstanding arrest warrant. They put him in the back of one of their patrol cars, and his vehicle was towed away. Shortly before I left, a police van arrived, probably to transport him, though I didn't understand why they wouldn't just use one of the 3 police cars already on scene. I was anxious throughout the whole ordeal, but there was a small sense of satisfaction knowing that his refusal to be polite and either use the vacuum or leave led to him getting arrested for whatever warrant he had. If he'd just been civil or moved along when asked, he might still be free right now. The whole thing started with a simple request: either use the facility for its purpose or move on. But some people think the rules don't apply to them and that they're entitled to do whatever they want on someone else's property. His attitude and aggression made a routine check turn into a much bigger problem. For him, not for me. My dad later told me he was proud of how I handled the situation, though he thinks I should be more assertive. Easy for him to say when he wasn't the one facing an aggressive stranger in the middle of the night. Still, I guess the experience was good practice for dealing with difficult people, even if it did leave me shaken for a bit. I work for a company with offices in different cities. Every morning we have a conference call with the same four people: me, my boss, the department head, and two guys from our Los Angeles branch. The calls are usually pretty standard, discussing numbers, paperwork, upcoming deadlines, that sort of thing. One particular Monday morning we were discussing some quarterly reports when suddenly there was a long drawn-out screeching noise that cut through the call. My boss asked what had made that noise. The first Los Angeles counterpart told that something had come loose in his chair and it had been making noise all day. I joked that it sounded like a fart and teased him about needing to lay off the taco trucks. Everyone laughed at my comment, and we continued with our call as normal. But every day after that, his chair kept making noises, and they seemed to get louder and more frequent. After a full week of these interruptions, the Los Angeles supervisor finally had enough. He told his subordinate that he didn't want to hear that annoying chair anymore and demanded he do something about it. Just like that, the squeaks disappeared. A month went by without incident. Then one day we were discussing some quarterly projections when the Los Angeles supervisor realized his counterpart didn't have the updated numbers. He said he'd walk over to his office to grab a copy. While he was away from his desk, we could hear their muffled conversation through the phone. The supervisor asked what that thing was on his employee's head. The Los Angeles counterpart told it was a headset he'd bought the previous month, so nobody would have to listen to his chair making noise. His boss said with frustration that wasn't what he meant at all. He had expected him to call facilities and either get the chair fixed or order a new one. When the Los Angeles counterpart said he liked his chair, his boss threatened him with being written up by information technology for plugging unapproved headsets into their telephones. He then ordered him to get a new chair and told him not to wear the headset again. During this exchange, my boss and I had muted ourselves because we were laughing so hard. I almost fell out of my own chair. This guy had bought a special headset just so he could keep his squeaky chair. The Los Angeles supervisor returned to his office, and his counterpart unplugged his headset since we could all hear the chair again. The call ended normally after that. For another week, we continued to hear the infamous squeak. Facilities management doesn't usually take that long to replace office furniture, so during our next call, I decided to ask about it. I questioned why he hadn't received his new chair yet. He told that facilities had delivered it 2 days ago, but it was still in the box because they hadn't had time to assemble it. His boss said he would call to hurry them along. He then told his employee that as soon as the new chair was put together, he wanted the old one completely gone from the office. The Los Angeles counterpart agreed. 2 days later, we were on our morning call when the familiar squeak returned. The very first time we heard it, the Los Angeles supervisor exploded with anger. He accused his employee of not throwing away the chair as told. The Los Angeles counterpart corrected him, pointing out that his boss had said he wanted the chair gone from the office, and it was gone from the office since he was working from home that day. My boss and I couldn't mute ourselves fast enough, and we both burst out laughing at the supervisor's expense. My boss even sided with the Los Angeles counterpart, telling that he was right. The supervisor told him to at least use that headset he'd bought since he couldn't see it if he was working from home anyway. The Los Angeles counterpart simply agreed. The next day, the Los Angeles counterpart was back in the office with his new chair. The squeaking was gone, but something was different. There was a sense of defeat in his voice. After the call, I sent him a private message asking if everything was okay. He responded with a photo of his old squeaky chair now sitting in his home office and his new office-approved headset on his desk at work. He'd found the perfect loophole. He'd used the quiet chair in the office to keep his boss happy, but when he worked from home, which was becoming more frequent, he'd use his squeaky chair and mute himself when needed. A month later, the Los Angeles supervisor was transferred to another department. On the first day, without him on our call, the Los Angeles counterpart showed up to the office with his squeaky chair. When asked about it, He simply said that new management meant new rules. The chair still squeaks to this day, and none of us mind. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.